Hello learners, welcome back to Venus Educators. I am Saleema Tahseen, your English faculty. So, before the age of industrial progress and modern machines, there was a group of poets and thinkers who believed that the true spirit of life lies in the soil, in simplicity, in hard work, and in faith. They stood up against the rush of factories, capitalism, and materialism. They said, let's take our stand for the South, for the land, and for the tradition. Yes, we are talking about the Southern agrarians, the thinkers who not only shaped American cultural identity but also laid the foundation of new criticism. So, by the end of this lecture, you will understand who were Southern agrarians, what ideas did they stand for, how did they influence the world of literary theory. So stay with me till the end and let's decode how this movement changed both literature and life. And let me tell you that this is the last part of our modern age literature. These three movements are the last three movements of the modern age literature. So what are those three movements? Southern agrarians, Black Mountain poets, and New Apocalyptics. So let's understand who the Southern agrarians are. They were a group of American writers, poets, and critics who emerged during the early 20th century. The main purpose was to defend Southern culture, that is, traditional Southern culture, particularly agrarian or rural life. Now, a word agrarian means farmer, right? So, here they actually want to protect that tradition. They want to protect that tradition against the growing influence of industrialization and modernism. So, if we go in a simple words, or if I say that in a nutshell, they believe that values of old South, hard work and simplicity and connection to the land were being lost in the sound, in the shout of machines and cities. So, we can see key details of them, like a group of 12 American intellectuals collectively worked on an essay collection titled I Will Take My Stand, the South and the Agrarian Tradition. It has been written in 1930. So it had 12 essays written by 12 different intellectuals. That's why they are sometimes called 12 Southerners or Southerners. Alright? Through this book, they argued that industrial progress may bring material comfort but it destroy moral and spiritual values. They wanted to preserve a life that was closely tied to nature, family, and faith. Okay, I hope up to here the concepts are clear. Now, next we have connection to new criticism. How it is connection to new criticism. Let's see. Interestingly, many members of Southern agrarian movement later became founders or supporters of new criticism. Writers like John Crow Ransom, Alan Tate, John Donald Wade, Robert Penn Warren, and Stock Young. Right? So, in these 5 writers, the people who are the big supporters of new criticism were John Crow Ransom, Alan Tate, and Robert Penn Warren. They actually played key roles in shaping literary theory. So, while the group started as a social and cultural movement, it gradually influenced literary theories by promoting close reading and textual analysis. So, we have learned what is new criticism. New criticism is criticizing a text by seeing or reading the text alone. We are not going to concern about the background of the author, right? So here, what is the key word for southern new criticism? That is close reading and textual analysis. That's how southern agrarians and new criticism became linked. So the writers, the three important figures who are there: John Crow Ransom, Alan Tate, and Robert Penn Warren. These are the person who are associated with the both movements, new criticism as well as southern agrarians. Now let's repeat the famous writers, or we can say the major person associated with this particular movement. The most notable members you must remember are John Crow Ransom, Alan Tate, Robert Penn Warren, John Donald Wade, and Stark Young. So these were not just poets or critics, they were thinkers who shaped how Americans stood both culture and literature in early 20th century. With this, we have come to see which are the important journals associated with, because UGC NET has a pattern of asking questions on the journals, literary journals, right? So we are going to see here what actually these journals are which are associated with this movement. So literary journals, the southern agrarians also contributed to several important literary journals like the Southern Review or the Kenyon Review. Please do remember these two names. It's very important from the point of view of UGC NET. These magazines became platforms for serious literary discussions and for spreading the new ideas of new criticism. If you remember, the Kenyon Review was especially influential because John Crow Ransom served as its editor. When we have talked about new criticism, I have told you that Kenyon Review was edited by John Crow Ransom. Alright, so with this we have come to end of this Southern Agrarian. So in conclusion, we can say that the Southern Agrarians were more than just a group of writers. They were cultural philosophers because they want to protect, they want to defend the culture. Yes, they wanted to preserve traditional life while resisting the moral decay they believe was caused by industrial progress. So their ideas deeply influenced American thought and gave rise to one of the most significant critical school, that is new criticism. That's why whenever you read about Ransom or Alan Tate, remember they were agrarians first and critics later. So that means first Southern agrarian movement has been came and which has laid the foundation for new criticism. Alright. So with this we have come to end of our lecture with Southern agrarians, but now I'm going to discuss about Black Mountain poets. Let's see who are the Black Mountain poets and what it's all about. So the Black Mountain poets were an influential group of American poets associated with Black Mountain College, a small experimental arts college in North Carolina. Okay, so this was not just a literary movement, it was a revolution in how poetry was composed and experienced. They believed poetry should be organic, open, and alive, not restricted. And it should not be restricted by what? Traditional meter or form. Right? So the key idea that they have given is projective words. Now what is projective words? Their core principle became from Charles Olson's essay Projective Verbs in 1950. So this concept has been taken from the Charles Olson's essay. It is named as projective verse. Olson said poetry should follow the breath and energy of the poet, not mechanical rhythm. So it basically telling us that it should be flow of thoughts. That's all. It should not be like bounded with some rhythm and the any sort of poetic prosody. Okay, so he called it open field composition. So projective words is called as open field composition, where the form of the poem grows naturally from the content and the poet's movement of thought. It's just the movement of thought. In other words, we can say that poetry is not a closed box, or we can say that it is a living process. See, I'm feeling something. I have a thought in my mind. At that time, I'll just give my thoughts to word, but I'm not going to, you know, arrange it in a particular rhythm. So it is said like that it is a open field, not a closed box. After major क्या कहेंगे major poets, the leading figures of this movement. Who are the major poets over here? Robert Creeley, Robert Duncan, Denise Levertov, Charles Olson. So the major poets or leading figures of this movement were Charles Olson, Robert Creeley, Robert Duncan, Denise Levertov, and Ed Don. These poets experimented with language, spacing, and rhythm, giving the reader freedom to feel the energy of thought directly. So, they are not asking you to give a systematic or rhythmed poet. They are just experimenting that how language and space and rhythm can give the reader to feel freedom, that the energy of a poet that directly influence them. For example, Creeley's poems use short broken lines to match the rhythm of real speech. Each pause feels like a breath. Okay, now what are the characteristics of Black Mountain poet? Black Mountain poetry is characterized by free verse and spontaneous structure, emphasis on the act of creation itself, use of space and line breaks to reflect emotion and rhythm. So basically, it is a free verse. There is no mandatory that you are going to write in a rhythm. Okay, collaboration between poetry, art, and music. This style connects poetry with jazz. Both are improvisational, both rely on rhythm and flow. So, literary influence is on the like Black Mountain poets or Black Mountain movement has given a literary influence, that they have a journal called the Black Mountain Review, and who is the editor of it? Robert Creeley became the editor of it and became a platform for publishing experimental American poets. Their ideas influenced later movements like the Beat Generation and the New York School. So these are going to be learned in postmodern age literature, the Beat Generation and the New York School. So the Black Mountain poets were truly ahead of their time. They gave poetry back its physicality and voice. That means they are not bounding poetry with rhythm. Next, to conclude with this particular movement, Black Mountain poets, actually what they are reflecting, Black Mountain poets reflect changing soul of 20th century literature. They were one group expressed emotional chaos and vision. The other explored freedom and organic form. Together, they reshaped the landscape of modern poetry. So one says that the free verse is there, another says that the rhythm is there. So basically they reshape the landscape of modern poetry. With this, we are moving to the third concept of today's video, that is new apocalyptics. Now who are there? So new apocalyptics were a fascinating group of British American poets active during the late 1930s and early 1940s. Their name came from the anthology The New Apocalypse, which symbolizes destruction and rebirth. Alright, a poetic response to the chaos of war. They believe that poetry should be visionary, emotional, and even prophetic. Something that reveals the human condition when civilization itself seemed to be collapsing. So basically, they want poetry to be visionary and emotional. The tone must be emotional and even prophetic, means you should be very pure in your thoughts when you are writing poetry. And basically they want you to reveal the human condition. Alright, so what are the historical background of new apocalyptics? These poets wrote during a time of deep unrest between the two world wars. Yes, I said you that it has been started in late 1930s and early 1940s. So this is the time period when the two world war was there. So industrialization, the great depression, and the destruction of faith in progress led to a feeling that modern society was doomed. So the apocalyptics turn to mythology, surrealism, and symbolism. So these are the new concepts that we are going to learn in our upcoming lectures to express their fears and hopes. Their poetry often feels dreamlike, filled with powerful imagery and emotional intensity. So when they are feeling, when they are going through these kind of feeling, when industrialization and great depression of the destruction was in progress, so they write the poetry which is filled with powerful imagery and emotional intensity, because their mindset was not at all peaceful and joyful, right? Quite opposite to the calm rationalism of earlier poets like Gregorians. So their mental status was completely different from the Gregorian poets because the World War time was there. Next, major poets who are associated with this particular movement are William Thomas, Kathleen Rennie, David Gascoigne, George Barker, Henry Treece, G. H. Fraser, Vernon Watkins, Robert Reid. Now let's understand many of them were inspired by D. H. Lawrence, especially this his idea that civilization had become too mechanical and that poetry must restore spiritual emotional energy to life. So they are very much influenced by whom? D.H. Lawrence. And what idea the D.H. Lawrence has been given? He said that civilization shall not be, you know, overcome or overloaded with mechanical poetry or mechanical world. So poetry must restore spirituality and emotional energy. Next we have characteristics of this particular movement, that is themes and style. Their poems reflect war, chaos, and the human struggle for meaning. They are searching for the meaning. They used surreal imagery, dream, symbolism, and mythic figures to explore man's inner world. So they have taken, I just told you that prophetic means they are asking you to be very pure in your thoughts. They are using mythic figures. So when you want to uh, show or use the example of any great personality, definitely you will take an example of a person who is very spiritual, right? So here also they shown or they depict from their poetry by using the mythic figures. Next, here I'm going to tell something about this movement which is not there in the slide. The movement itself was short lived, but it represented a bridge between the audience generation and the postmodern poets. So in the first video we have discussed audience group. So audience group to tell apocalyptics, it is a bridge, postmodernism poets, so it is a bridge between these two periods. It reminded readers that poetry is not just intellect, it's imagination and intuition. The new Apocalyptics gave British poetry a new depth and emotional power after the disillusionment of war. So, with this, I'm gonna conclude the video. So, from the visionary and emotional poetry of Apocalyptics, let's know move to the across the Atlantic to America and look at a very different kind of poetic experiment. So that is nothing but a new, that is the movement called black movement poets that we have already discussed over here. So with this I'm gonna conclude the video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thank you so much.